I'm so excited for today's episode because we're going to be talking about something that I've been wanting to talk about for so long, and that is what does doing the work on yourself actually mean? Because that phrasing gets thrown around so much. Everybody tells you you have to do the work on yourself. You have a mindset issue, oh, you need to do the work on yourself. And then you're like, cool, so what does that mean? And they're like, oh, well, you just need to work on it. And you're like, okay, well, can you give me an example? And nobody can ever tell you what it is. Nobody can ever give you an example. And you're just left kind of being like, well, shit, what do I do? It's kind of like somebody telling you, meet me at this restaurant. And then you, for the love of God, can't find the directions on Google Maps, right? So today, we are going to be talking about how to actually do the work, what it actually is in a very no-nonsense way, the misconceptions about it, and how to actually take that and integrate it from an action and alignment state of view into your business, into your life for more profit, peace, and purpose in a very tangible way. So the thing about doing the inner work or just emotions in general in business, I feel like when you're very ambitious, strategic, strategy obsessed, you come from this place of like, feelings aren't facts. You should, completely dissociate from your feelings in business and just like lead with strategy and, make very clear decisions. While I don't totally disagree with that, I think the reason why entrepreneurs have the problems that they actually have in their business is because they actually don't understand their emotions fully. So they're avoiding their emotions and completely detaching, and they're not even realizing the consequences those decisions in their business are actually having. So if you are someone who is like, I don't use emotions in my business, I don't follow feelings, I only follow facts, you still use emotions, you just don't realize it because we're humans at the end of the day. So my whole thing is that I've realized after going on my own healing journey and integrating it into my strategy is that you're really good at using your emotions against you, whether that's self-sabotage, putting unnecessary pressure on yourself, the endless spirals. So if you're just so naturally good at that, why don't you actually learn how to use your emotions to amplify your success? Because there is a way to do that, and that's basically what we're going to be talking about today. So I want you to go into this conversation with that perspective of, I'm really good at using my emotions against me. How can I actually leverage my emotions to amplify my success? So I am truly on a mission to help women like you, high performing, ambitious, driven, strategy obsessed business owners shed the stigma that being human in business is considered weak, and put power back in the softness and strategy, because there's truly nothing wrong with that. That by itself is a superpower. Because what I've realized over this last year is that if you're resisting this, that is actually the key to true sustainable success on your own terms for once. And when I talk about sustainable success, that's also another like marketing buzzword that's often used. So when I say that, I don't mean your product suite, recurring income. I mean like sustainable success for you as a human who is leading your business. Because up until this point, you've been very good at creating a sustainable business in terms of cash flow, marketing, sales, team, all that stuff. And you should be so proud of that. But I think you're starting to come to the point where you're realizing while you've been focusing on that, you've actually forgotten to create a sustainable business that works for you as a human being. And that's why you are where you are, where something is not clicking anymore and you don't understand why, because it's always worked towards now. So before we go into basically like the misconceptions and why mindset and inner healing, especially in the online space, is like really scammy and BS, I want to talk about like who should be prioritizing the inner work over strategy. And so if you find yourself saying any of these things, I know it's me, I'm a perfectionist, or yeah, I know it's just a mindset problem, I'll get over it. Yet despite being that self-aware, you can't overcome your own self-sabotage and resistance. So you just try to bulldoze through it. You need to be focusing on inner work, not strategy. If the pressure and expectations you put on yourself to push for more and have goals just for the sake of having goals, that you don't actually know what the motive of that intention is for, and that makes you want to burn it all down some days, you need to focus on inner work over strategy right now. If you feel bitter that business seems easier for other people online when the whole time you've equally done all the things, you've made the big investments, you've hustled, you've worked really hard, you've implemented all the strategies, and yet you're still not hitting the same level of success as they are, it's not a strategy problem. You need to be focusing on inner work. When you experience an income dip and you instantly start panicking because your self-worth is tied to a virtual number in your bank account, which leaves you feeling guilt, shame, like you're a failure, like it's all about to crash, that's not a strategy problem. That's, you need to be focusing on inner work. And my favorite of all, if up until this point you've been a strategy is the only solution in business, because I was definitely that person type of founder, because isn't that what business is, right? External results, which we'll get to later. You're probably starting to realize that maybe it's not a strategy problem because you're literally trying everything I just mentioned and yet you're still feeling lost. So if you resonate with any of those points, this conversation is for you. So let's get into why mindset, inner healing work in the online space really does sound like bullshit. And it does come off spammy. Like, I come from corporate marketing. Like, I have a marketing degree. I spent 10 years in corporate marketing in New York City, working for really big brands like Martha Stewart, the Smithsonian, Teen Vogue. So when I came into the online space after starting my company and I heard people use terms like quantum leaping, I was like, what the actual fuck is this? I was like, no, that can't be real. Like, that can't be real. Like, imagine if I walked into like Teen Vogue and started talking about that kind of shit. It just wouldn't be a thing, right? So I really want to dive into like the misconceptions, and then we'll actually talk about what the inner work actually is as I know it to be and all of my clients know it to be. So you probably might hear words like alignment, flow, surrender, being in somebody's energy, quantum leaping. None of those things are the work. None of those. I want to tell you that right now. None of those things are the work. So if you hear anybody talking about those things and they're not talking about it in a way that I'm about to be explaining it, just take it with a grain of salt, because those are tools, but those are not the work that is actually going to give you results, right? So everybody talks about doing the work, but nobody actually tells you like where to start, right? And I think when you have like control problems and are a perfectionist, you almost feel dumb even asking where to start, because you just pride yourself on being like the person who knows how to do everything. And especially if you've definitely or someone who is seasoned in business and you've been in the industry a while, it almost seems like, kind of like dumb asking questions if you've been in business for so long. So I completely get it, because that was me too. But I think what comes off really spammy in the online space, besides what I just mentioned, and specifically for women like us who are super ambitious, very driven, logical, strategy focused, when we're presented with things like marketing that either sounds too fluffy or spammy, it turns us off. You assume that doing the inner work is journaling, meditating, affirmations, having this like rigid morning routine, or paying to be in someone else's energy. Like, all those things turn you off. I personally don't like journaling. I mean, I do it sometimes, but I'm not like Miss Taylor Swift. Like, I can't just sit down and like pour my heart and soul onto a page. I really just like don't enjoy doing that, so I don't do that. A lot of my clients also read like self-help books, listen to podcasts, buy programs on manifesting and affirmations and things like that. But that leaves you with no idea how to actually implement or get started. And that just leaves you like even more stuck, which turns you off, right? And probably like the thing that I experience the most and what I see in a lot of my clients is that when you are very ambitious and driven and very like masculine, logical, then when people talk about doing the work, they are very polar opposite from you, and that turns you on because that turns you off, because you realize that. And probably the one that I relate to the most, and so do a lot of my clients, is that when you are very ambitious, highly driven, strategic, right? Like, you run a very like serious business, you can't relate to anybody doing the work because the people who are actually talking about doing the work are so polar opposite from you, right? Like if you have a very like elevated brand and somebody is, on the complete other spectrum of like woo woo hot pink, you're like, I'm not going to invest in that person because even if they do know what they're talking about, I physically can't relate to them. And if I can't relate to them, then I don't feel safe being guided by them. Right. So, like, that was my biggest thing is I didn't see a single person like me building a business, like me building a brand, like me, where we share similar values, goals, that also actually talked about doing the work and knew how to do the work. And that's basically why I created the Balanced Entrepreneur membership, is because I not only experienced this gap, but so many of my clients experienced that gap, which is why I started offering it. And then I talked to so many other business owners who are like at say 7, 8, and I talked to so many other business owners who are at 7, 8 figures who talked about this same thing, where they were like, it was so hard starting this journey because nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to actually tell you what to do. It's kind of like the secret thing that you have to kind of just like work out on your own and kind of feel like shame about it. So I just want to put that out there, that like if you feel like you can't connect to doing the work because there's nobody like there out you, I'm really hoping that this can be a safe space for you. Okay. And lastly, there's a really big emphasis on feeling like you're going to lose your identity once you start doing the work. I know that was one of my biggest insecurities and biggest fears, is I didn't want to become super fluffy, super go with the flow, woo woo. I actually really love the fact that I'm strategic, that I work in frameworks, that I'm a planner. I love that about myself. And what I've actually learned through this journey and what my clients learn is we're not taking any part of your identity away from you. If anything, we're looking at how can we make you more you, just without all the like the baggage that's like on you. Right. So we're actually trying to make you more you, and that is it. We're trying to get you into alignment by actually. Okay, so now that we talked about the misconceptions about why mindset and um, inner healing comes off really MLM-y in the online space, let's talk about what inner work actually is for ambitious, driven entrepreneurs like us. And basically, what it is it comes down to 3 areas that I've not only seen in myself, but I see in all of my clients, and through market research, through talking to so many different types of entrepreneurs, all the way from 6 to like multiple 8. It comes down to 3 areas. So here's actually the approach to action and alignment, which we go through in the Balanced Entrepreneur membership. So the way I see inner work is basically treating it as an internal chiropractic adjustment. So we're trying to align you to find parts that are fighting the whole, right? Think about it as like a car engine and like something's rattling. How are we tweaking things so it runs smoother to full capacity, right? So if you're a business owner that desires longevity, your number one priority above marketing, sales, any of that needs to be understanding how to pinpoint your blind spots. Because if you don't understand how to pinpoint your blind spots, you're not going to be able to implement a strategy that's actually going to give you the results you want. It might give you the profits you want, but it's not going to lead and amplify your purpose, your passion, your peace, right? And that's why so many people make a lot of money, but then they're like, wait, but I burnt out. Wait, I keep adding more strategies. I keep outsourcing and I still feel the same I did, right? And it's because you're not prioritizing the number one thing, and that's the blind spots. Looking at the parts that are fighting the whole. So to me, inner work is basically, think about it as an internal chiropractic adjustment. So trying to align you to find parts that are actually fighting the whole. Like, a car engine, something's like rattling in there. We're trying to tighten up all and tweak up all the loose ends to make sure that the whole entity, which is you and your business, are working together to actually give you that purpose and profit and peace. Because if you're a business owner who desires longevity, your number one priority in business should actually be understanding what your blind spots are and constantly looking for them. that is how you're going to mitigate that resistance and actually not have that friction between like, do I scale profits or do I scale my purpose? It's constantly looking at that. And I know that you are driven, you're ambitious, you're strategy focused. So we don't want to lose that and just like go with the flow and surrender. But the way I see it is instead, what if inner work could revive and give new life and actually strengthen your business so you can be more focused and aligned in a very authentic version of you in your business, right? So cutting out all the noise, shedding all the things that aren't working you, and just getting you so focused and aligned with what you truly desire that that external pressure and all that just like external like garbage just doesn't matter, right? So it truly is not about losing yourself. It's finding who you really are behind the pressure and expectations and then taking action from that. So, the three areas that we're going to be going over that are actually the inner work. Number one is creating a spiral free life by finding your inner baseline, aka balance. Now, while traditional balance doesn't exist, so when I'm talking about balance, I'm never talking about a fixed ratio of time or the way people talk about work life balance. Now, that's complete and utter bullshit. I'm not talking about, oh, giving 50% here, giving 50% there. I am talking about balance as an internal baseline inside of you, which is basically having a regulated nervous system. Because your inner balance creates external balance, even in times of chaos. So I'm not saying that you are never going to have another problem ever again. That's delusional and not in like a cute way, okay? And not like a delulu salulu kind of way. I'm talking about when business gets chaotic, because it always will, when life gets chaotic, because it always will. And if anybody tries to sell you on a solution in business of like, oh, I finally reached the level where everything comes with ease, please know that that is complete marketing. That is just marketing. That doesn't actually exist. That's like saying that by the time you reach a certain age, you just don't have problems in life. That's not, that's just not, that's not what we're doing here. It's not possible, right? So I like to say that like the state of my business no longer dictates the state of my being. So while issues come up and there's always chaos around me, because I know how to regulate my nervous system, I know how to get back to that equilibrium, that baseline, that helps me navigate those situations with more ease and less resistance. Because for a really long time, my business ran me instead of me running my business. And I feel like a lot of you feel like that right now. So, when we talk about balance, I often ask my clients, can you even define what balance looks like to you or feels like for you? And a lot of the times, I get the answer of, no, I actually can't. Because when they actually stop and think about it, they're living in a constant state of just manic. All they know is spirals. So think about it right now. Can you actually stop this episode and define what your internal balance looks like? What does it feel like? When was the last time you felt like you actually had that inside of you? And it's because your nervous system is used to operating at either 0% or 100%, right? So if you're on vacation, you're supposed to be at 0%, but then if you're working, you feel like you constantly have to be at 100%. So for the most part, you don't actually know what it's like operating in that gray area, but that gray area is where that peace and profit is going to come from in a very aligned way. But oftentimes, if we're not operating at that 100%, we're thinking about, oh, well, maybe I should be doing more, right? And we feel guilt and we feel shame. So what we're trying to do with this baseline is move you into the 99% and say, how do we get you working maybe from 0 to 50 and then 50 to 75 and then 100 instead of constantly going and spiking from 0 to 100, 0 to 100. That is where your burnout is coming from. It's not a time management issue. It's not an outsourcing issue. It's the fact that you do not know how to move in that inner baseline in a very fluid way. You only know how to spike and you feel very guilty and shameful about it. But the truth is that you never learned how to take care of yourself and actually come back to that baseline, because you say that you're in a season of hustle when, like, let's be honest, your life is just chaos. And that is kind of like something I just had to be like brutally honest with myself, is like, am I in a season of hustle or like is this just my life? And once I realized like I was living for those spikes, I was living for those dopamine hits, that's when I started realizing like, oh, I actually can have more control of my emotions. I can have control in situations where there's chaos around me, and I don't need to be spiking, because I don't know about you, but when I spike, it like ruins my whole day. And then you start yeah, and then you start spiraling again because you're like, "Oh my god, there goes my day. I didn't do anything." Right? So I often see this when clients have like income dip months, or they're like halfway through a month and they're like not booked out yet, instantly spiral, right? It's because you don't have the tools to get back to baseline and navigate that situation with more ease and less resistance. So in the membership, what we really work on is identifying your internal baseline and then equipping you with tools to swiftly return to it. So you'll be able to shed that pressure and that urgency, ultimately boosting results, reducing resistance, and reviving your inner peace. It's possible, trust me. So I'm not saying that this is like a one-stop shop solution to never spiral again. I'm saying like this is where you have healthy tools. So in times of chaos, you can neutralize it and actually have clarity in a very healthy coping way. So, number 2 is developing your internal compass, aka your intuition, to have radical, deep trust in decisions and then integrate that with strategy. So, integrating intuition with strategy. So, learning how to master self trust and intuition to make decisions actually feel really safe, secure, and confident, no matter of what season of business or life you're in. Learning how to actually integrate that intuition and strategy so you can maximize the results while maintaining that sense of security is huge. The more you scale, the more you triple your income, triple your company, right? Like that is something that is huge that needs to be worked on. Oftentimes, I see trusting your intuition in one of two ways. Either you don't really have a lot of self trust, so therefore you take on everybody else's opinions because you constantly look for like that best solution. And you're like, oh, well, because that coach made it to 7 figures, I need to take everything they say and follow it to a T, right? Or you're looking at other people and be like, oh, I need to do that if they're doing that. And that leads to comparison, right? And you, instead of learning to sort people's ideas through your intuition, you just take on everybody's ideas, and that actually leads you feeling more exhausted and more lost because you don't actually know how to navigate your own intuition and your own desires for creating offers or marketing or anything like that. And that truly leads to unfulfillment and burnout. Or you're the type of person like I was, where you say you do trust your gut, but then when something happens and it doesn't go your way, you instantly spiral it into like, oh my God, maybe I can't trust myself with money. Oh my God, maybe that was a bad decision. And then you go into like the failure spiral mode, right? So you only trust yourself when things work out for you. So in the membership, we really work on developing your own compass so you know how to become that sorting machine instead of that soaking machine that you probably are right now. And instead of me giving you a roadmap for like how I do it, we develop your own roadmap because obviously you are your own person and only you know how your intuition works, right? So something like one of my clients said that I thought was really interesting is she said before she learned to trust her intuition, she was giving her power away. So she found that she was constantly questioning herself. Imposter syndrome was running rampant because she just didn't have the tools and the knowledge to understand what a clear yes and what a clear no felt like in her body. And so, because she didn't know what that felt like, ego was taking over, ego was running her decisions, doubt, fear, all of that was making decisions for her instead of her intuition and instead of coming from a very full yes or full no place, right? So now when that pressure comes up and all this like bullshit comes up, she knows how to sort it out of her, which is something that your intuition can ultimately help with. I found from my own personal experience that like when I truly learned how to tap into my intuition and then apply that with strategy, I was able to work from a place of flow versus force, meaning where I wasn't working on things because I felt like I had to, or because this is what I should be putting out there. It's marketing I should be putting out there, content I should be putting out there, offers I should be putting out there. I truly was leaning into my intuition because I've established my internal baseline. And I was able to tap into my actual wants and desires and then work from a place of flow that actually felt really exciting because I was working on something that was actually aligned with me for the first time versus working on a place from, well, this is what I just need to do because I have all these insecurities that, like, this is the only way I'm going to make profit. It's a very different experience working from a place that feels really good and easy and natural versus working from a place of pressure and fear and insecurity, which is what I see a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, is they're constantly trying to fix the immediate problem, or at least what they associate to be the immediate problem. And when you have security in your intuition and you feel so confident in your decision making, regardless of what the outcome is, you start seeing the bigger picture. And instead of putting band-aids on every single thing, every single problem in front of you, you start actually working on solutions for the long run. And that is a game changer for your strategy and for your longevity, for profits, for inner peace, and just for like sustainability of your company as a whole. So, number 3 is overcoming self sabotage and letting go of the pressure. So, when you experience an income dip, like I was talking about before, my guess is you instantly start panicking because ultimately your self worth is tied to your income, which leaves you feeling guilt, shame, like you're a failure, like it's all about to crash down, and completely out of balance, right? Because once again, you create the story, your self worth is tied. You don't know how to get back to your baseline, right? You don't actually have the tools to neutralize these emotions because you don't know how to process them to begin with, right? So, what I see in a lot of people is you look at other people and see what they're doing, and in turn, that becomes just another thing on your to-do list. So number 3 is overcoming self-sabotage and pressure. Obviously, this is a very like broad category. It looks different for everyone, but a couple examples of this is going back to the income dip example, right? So a lot of the times money is directly tied to your self-worth. I know for me, when I was going through my healing journey, that was a big thing I had to undo, is neutralizing money to the point where like it just didn't hold me hostage. Every single month, every single day, it was this like virtual number that dictated my mood. Somebody could literally tell if I was having a good month or a bad month just by like the way I physically acted over a number in my bank account. Like that shouldn't happen. That's not healthy. Once again, like your internal state of being dictates your external. And that's how I personally want to lead, just not even in business, but in my life, right? So it's really like neutralizing the feeling of guilt, shame, failure. Like it's all about to crash down because you just don't know how to break the cycle, right? Because you just don't have the tools for knowing how to neutralize the emotion, for knowing how to process the emotion, and really being okay letting go of that like rope that's just tied around you with those numbers. Another example is comparison, right? A lot of times, what I see is the reason why you're so burnt out and you think you have this huge workload is because you're looking at other people online and subconsciously, without even realizing it, you're adding it to your to do list because you're like, oh, so and so is doing that. Why didn't I think of that? I need to do it. So then your to do list becomes this gigantic list. And instead of listening to your intuition, instead of knowing your internal baseline, you just automatically start piling your to-do list because it's coming from a place of insecurity and lack, not a place of like, oh, that seems interesting, and move on. Okay. 3, feeling pressure just to push for more for the sake of pushing more, right? Because if you're not pushing for more, then you're going to be a failure, right? Because what is everybody going to think? Something I like to ask my clients, and I ask inside of the membership, is why do you have the goals you have? Like money goals, why do you have them? And I'm not asking that from a place of like, it's bad to be making like 7 figures or 100K months, whatever your number is, I'm not saying any of that, but I'm saying, like, what is your motive behind the intention of that goal? If your goal is 20K just for the sake of it being 20K because that's the goal that you were fed online and like you don't actually know how to create your own goals, then you're chasing other people's version of success, which is exactly why you feel unfulfilled. It's exactly why you don't have inner peace. It's exactly why maybe your own profits are struggling because you keep chasing things without actually learning to understand what you desire. I often ask also, are you so something I want you to think about is the current goals that you have now, are they getting you closer to your destiny, your soul's purpose, or are you chasing the feeling of being good enough? Are you chasing success just for the sake of thinking that you're finally going to get some kind of validation? That is a good marker for what your goals say about you, or rather, what does the motive behind the intention of the goal say about you? So those are just a couple examples of like self-sabotage and pressure, but ultimately we want in the membership, we want to work on healthy ways to identify the root cause and then implement practical tools that work for you to break free from these destructive cycles of behaviors, thought patterns in a very tangible way for not only growth in your business, but actually growth in your personal life as well, because the two are interconnected. So here's the deal about doing all of this inner work. Navigating a business while living a full life doesn't one day magically get to be easy. I think we all know that by now, right? This facade of start your own business and live a life of like ease, that went out the door maybe like, I don't know, the first year, right, of us having our businesses. But I will say, when you increase your capacity to hold bigger success and even bigger challenges, plus you have the right tools to manage them effectively, the pressure doesn't get to feel. So here's the deal about all this inner work that we've been talking about. Navigating building a business doesn't one day get to be magically easy, okay? And if anybody makes it seem like that online, they are lying. They are lying, okay? And I think we know that by now. I think this whole notion of like start your business and go sit on a beach, like that's not that's not reality, okay? But what I am saying is when you increase your capacity to hold bigger success, right? Hold bigger income, hold a bigger business, and hold even bigger challenges, and you have the right tools to manage them effectively, the pressure gets to feel easier versus eating away at you. And that's the secret to balancing ambition and inner peace and what we work on in the membership. Because if you want to triple your income, you're going to triple your problems. So it's not that you get to this level of business or in life where you're like, okay, I'm finally at this place where it gets to be easier. No, it doesn't get to be easier. The challenges become 10 times harder. But because you have these inner work tools, because you have healthy coping mechanisms, because you have that inner baseline, they feel easier because they're more manageable. But right now, I can bet you if you're listening to this, they're just eating away at you and you're trying to bulldoze through them and you're trying to pretend they're not there and you're probably just thinking that strategy is going to solve everything. That's the ultimate goal of the inner work, is that it gets to feel easier because you for the first time in your life know how to manage them effectively. So one of the questions I get asked is like, isn't this the same with therapy? And to this, I would say no. Obviously, this is not therapy. And this is also not like a therapy dupe. This is a great addition to therapy. And basically, why I created the Balanced Entrepreneur membership is because I do weekly therapy. But when I was going through like the depths of my healing journey, therapy honestly wasn't enough for me as a business owner. Because while therapy is wonderful and my therapist is wonderful, unless you're physically a business owner and in the online space specifically, nobody can actually understand and give you advice for how to integrate inner healing with business strategy. And so that was the ultimate goal in creating the membership, is because that was the biggest gap I saw, is there's nowhere in the space that offers true integration. And you might be thinking like, well, just hire a business coach, go to therapy and get a mindset coach. First of all, I don't want to be talking to 3 different people. Okay? And second of all, that's still not integration, because unless your business coach and your mindset coach actually talk to each other and create a game plan together, then you're left trying to figure out how to integrate the two. And that just leaves a lot of like messiness and things falling through the cracks. So with this program, I really wanted this to be like a one-stop shop for like, how can I spot, oh, that's a mindset issue. Oh, that's a strategy problem. This is actually what we should work on first. True integration is how you are going to enhance your profits and enhance your peace in a very tangible way. And then also, healing is very lonely. I think one of the most difficult parts for me in my healing journey, and I've heard from so many other people who have been down this road, is that once you start doing this work, it feels very isolating because once you have become aware, once your consciousness expands, you no longer relate to a lot of people online who are talking about money wins, who are talking about vacations, handbags, and no like shade to any of that stuff. But once you've gone through this work, you want to have deeper conversations. You want to talk about self-sabotage. You want to talk about how your self-worth is tied to money and how to move past that. You want to have actual human conversations about what it's like being a human and navigating a business. And I found for me, I was so desperate to have those conversations and have somebody to relate to. And it was really hard to find people like that because, once again, as people talk about authenticity online like all the live long day, not a lot of people actually are. Not a lot of people want to actually have the hard conversations. And that just makes us all feel like we're on an island by ourselves. And the reason why entrepreneurship is so lonely to begin with. So, a really big part of this membership is also community, which is why we have the monthly calls, which is why we have the workshops, because this is truly like a community that supports you, is a safe space, and there's no judgment here. And I think a narrative that we can all relate to when it comes to hard work or success is that because we're so ambitious, we all have a similar core belief that our entire lives we've believed that success has to equal hard work, right? Like we have to push, we have to shove, we have to go into it with brutal force or else we're not going to have it, right? It's an all or nothing sums game. And at this point, it's just led to physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion, right? Once again, strategy can't fix that. So, in this process, it's truly about learning how to break up with this specific definition of success so you can actually learn to align success with inner peace and have no barriers or friction between the two, because so often, and I used to feel this way too, is you feel like you constantly have to choose between this or that. You're never allowed both, because duality between having inner peace and success is a myth, and once again sounds like marketing lingo, but it truly is not a myth. But the approach is not going to be solved by creating another product or income stream. It's just not. So the Balanced Entrepreneur membership truly was founded to empower high driven founders like you to shed the success pressure, to overcome self-sabotage, and actually integrate self-trust into strategies so you actually can enhance success in your business without sacrificing inner peace in your life. And you don't have to lose your strategy loving identity in the process. So that brings us to my next topic of strategy is not your savior. And I think this was like the biggest thing that I had to unlearn and let go. And I went like kicking and screaming into it because I just didn't want to let go of that core belief. Now, I'm still a strategy addict, but I'm also an inner work convert. And I actually really love that about myself. I've truly balanced the masculine, the feminine, the strategy, the inner work. It's a duality. And once again, that doesn't mean it's 50-50. It means it's a fluid motion that I push and pull when I feel I need one or the other. And that's the duality of it. And so when you think that strategy is your savior, that's why you don't take mindset and inner work seriously. I actually remember like 2 years ago, I was in the middle of a launch and my strategy was just hitting a wall. And I couldn't, for the love of God, I couldn't pinpoint what it was, right? So finally I had somebody look at it and they were like, I think you just have like a mental block around whatever the mental block was. And I very passively said like, oh, I know, it's just a mindset problem. I need to get over it. I need to get over it. That phrase right there. How many times do you say that? How many times do you say, oh, I'm a perfectionist. I just need to get over it? That is the problem right there. Going back to those blind spots I talked about, that should have been the number one thing I was working on, because it's not just getting over it, it's understanding it and then knowing how to apply it and neutralize it. That's what actually was preventing my launch from actually hitting the goals I wanted to hit. It wasn't a strategy problem. But you need to be open to actually understanding that one, that could be an actual problem, and two, you need to know that that is actually a blind spot that's stopping you from hitting the goals you want to hit, right? So I find that in business, you actually need two different types of skill sets. You need the skill set of operating the logistics of a business, knowing how to market, right? Knowing how to have a sales plan, profitability, all of that stuff, which is what you're really good at. And strategy, right? Strategy dominates that. But you have to also realize, like, you're no longer working for a business, you're also running one. And you just never were given the tools to actually understand what that means or what that looks like, right? So it's very different knowing how to operate a business from the logistical side and being the actual leader and the visionary in the good times and the bad times. And that requires mental fortitude. And that's a muscle you need to develop. And so when that muscle is not developed, that's why you think strategy is always your savior, because you don't even have the awareness, or the use of that muscle is not strong enough to realize, hey, there's this whole other side that I'm just not taking seriously because I just have no idea that I need to take it seriously. So that's also where the like action and alignment come in the membership, is like, how do we work on strengthening that muscle so you know when to push and pull the inner work lever versus the strategy lever, so you can have that optimized success. So the problem with being 100% strategy focused is it's literally costing you not only profits, but your peace. And I think you know that by now. But the way I've truly experienced it myself this past year is that you truly need to heal the CEO in you, the human in you, before you scale to the level you want to. Or maybe if you already are at the level you want to, I'm guessing it's getting really hard to maintain it, right? Because while you have the strategy figured out, you yourself are not there yet. You cannot outgrow your internal limiting beliefs by adding more strategy on top of it. It just doesn't work that way. So, how are you going to triple your income without tripling your problems, as we talked about before, right? Perfect example about the like, if you scale to 10 million, how are you going to act when your income dip is like $1 million plus, right? Like, those are the type of decisions and situations you're going to be put in that are going to make you and break you, and you need to be prepared for that. You need to, by the time you reach that point, your muscle needs to be developed. And I just wish somebody would have been so transparent about this with me, which is why I'm approaching it from like a tough love kind of standpoint, because this is the shit that actually matters, but you don't see anybody ever talking about it on Instagram or social media because it's not sexy. Everybody wants to use marketing that actually appeals, right, to like inspirational, but nobody actually wants to tell you, like, hey, you actually need to work on this muscle because you don't have mental fortitude, right? But it's so true. And what I've noticed in all of my clients and just like in the industry is that there's 4 events that happen that cause you to truly like hit a wall with strategy. And it's not a matter of if your strategy will stop working, it's a matter of when, because it 1,000% will. I didn't think that was possible until that happened to me. So I find that either a tragedy occurs or like some kind of trauma in your life. So grief, medical issues, cancer, relationship issues, divorce. For me personally, it was grief. A life change, right? Becoming a mom, adopting a dog, moving, career, anything that like physically disrupts your life. Hitting a wall, sales plateau, lack of motivation, resenting what you do, burnout, or hitting a rock bottom, financial, personal, realizing that the business you creating is eating away at you, realizing that like you don't like any of your offers, realizing that the whole business you built, you actually just like don't like anymore. And when you hit one of these 4 experiences, that's when you really start realizing that once again, you've created a long-term sustainable business, but you haven't created one for you as a human. So for me personally, when I was going through grief earlier this year, that set me into depression, which is, that's normal for grief. But because I didn't have these tools earlier on, that made me realize that the business I was creating wasn't actually giving me inner peace, wasn't actually fulfilling. And so when you have the depression of grief and you pile like a self-identity crisis on top of that, I mean, that's just like rock bottom. And that's the moment I kind of realized, like, I hate all of this. Why am I doing any of this? But before then, I had this core belief that, like, no matter what, you just bulldoze through resistance, anxiety, pressure, burnout, because at the end of the day, mindset is for the weak and doesn't create tangible results in business. So until I suffered through a loss and grief, that's when I kind of realized that, like, I actually don't need to be doing any of that. I actually need to be focusing on profit and peace at the same time. And it's so possible to have both, but I need to strengthen that muscle. And I just thought I knew better than to strengthen that muscle. Okay, so now that we talked about like what the inner work is, let's talk about actually how to work through it. So I have a 4-step framework for actually integrating action and alignment. And the 4 steps are awareness, acknowledgement, transformation, and integration. So I'm going to walk you through all 4 of them. And this is what we focus on inside of the membership. So number 1 is awareness and your internal baseline that we covered earlier. So the first step in whatever your struggles may be right now or wanting to achieve is, first, we need to identify and help you discover the root cause of whatever your blocks are and the core beliefs behind them that need to be unlearned in order to rebuild in a very healthy way. So once we establish that and we establish what your nervous system baseline is, then we can move forward, right? We have tangible like things that we're working on. Number 2 is then acknowledgement. So now that we know the root causes, now that we have an idea of what your nervous system baseline could look like, when triggers, habits, and patterns start showing up in your day-to-day life, that's when you need to actively acknowledge them. Because right now, I feel like you're just bulldozing through them. You're not even aware of what you're doing. So what we want to do is go from awareness to acknowledgement as they're happening in real life. And so in the membership, we help you effectively acknowledge how to do this and identify like where they fall on your baseline so you can help move through them, right? So for example, do you actually acknowledge when you're being a perfectionist, or do you just like bulldoze through it, spend 5 hours creating a post, not posting it, and then be like, oh, well, I guess my content strategy isn't good enough. Hate to break it to you, that's not a content strategy problem, right? And so then the third part is transformation. This is actually like the work, and that's helping you develop tools to actually release and change the course of action when these triggers and habits and patterns arise, right? So breaking up from pressure, managing self-sabotage, right? Like actively working through these cycles. So that may look like different things to other people. For some people, it's journaling. For other people, it's EFT tapping. For other people, it is meditation. But I'm not saying you have to do any of that. It's all about finding what works for you. And then lastly, here's where we actually integrate with strategy. So once we have our baseline, we have our awareness, we know how to acknowledge, and we know the tools we need to actually work on these triggers and these habits and cycles, then we're in a place to actually create new healthy core beliefs. And because we're now in alignment and we have this like full body yes of we know what to do and we're very confident in that, then we can create a business strategy, offers, look at your profit plan from that, right? So once again, it's like before, what were your goals versus now what are your goals and how are we going to go about them? I can by now probably your motive behind the intention is going to look very different than it looked like before. So this is all to say that when you actually learn how to integrate action and alignment, this is not a one-stop shop kind of process. Like this isn't like, okay, cool, I did it, I went through the 4 steps, now I never have to do it again. This is a process. So once you've learned how to integrate action and alignment, it's not like a one-stop shop solution. This is an ongoing process, which is why this offer was created in a membership format, because it's not like you're never going to have another trigger again. Your triggers are always going to be them, but remember what I said about it feeling easier. right? And having that support and having other people who are going through what you're going through makes 10 times the difference when you can actually check in with someone and talk through it, because those triggers some days are going to feel like, whoo, I navigated through that with so much ease, no resistance, it was great. And then other days, they're really going to hit you hard. So it's an ongoing process because you're human. So you're always going to be triggered. Business is always going to feel chaotic, but it doesn't have to eat away at you. So I want you to ask yourself, like, am I truly present in my personal life right now and in my business? So I want you to ask yourself, like, are you truly present in your personal life right now? When you go out to dinner, when you go on date night, when you go on vacation, when you're just hanging out with your friends, are you able to be fully present, or is your business always eating away at you? Right? Do you feel like you constantly need a vacation from your vacation because the anxiety is physically eating you from inside, but you can't talk about it with anyone? Are you constantly feeling like it's just never enough? When will you finally feel successful and fulfilled? Because that is something that you can actually break up from. At the end of the day, you have to be radically honest with yourself and ask yourself, am I addicted to the chaos? Am I addicted to the stories I tell myself? The mindset stories, the comparison, the I'm never good enough. Why is it always somebody else? The suffering, the spiral. That is a brutally honest conversation I had to have with myself. And the answer to that was yes. I was addicted to those toxic habits. I was addicted to those stories because, as awful as they were, I knew to expect them. They were comforting, right? I knew the story I was going to tell myself. But as you're listening to this episode, I want you to kind of take stock in what is my current reality today? Is that the reality I want for the next 10 years? All the feelings, all the emotions that I'm feeling today, is that what I want to feel over the next 10 years? And if the answer to that is no, you know that it's time for you to start integrating inner work with strategy. Guys, so if any of this resonates with you, join the membership. It's $97. The link is in the show notes. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me at the AW Creative on Instagram. And I'm so excited to hear your thoughts on this episode and so excited to see you inside of the membership.